Hello, everybody. Welcome to Starfleet Tactical. I, of course, am Chris Reed, and I've got Pat Doyle here with me. Pat, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. Things are going pretty well. Nice sunny day, 45 degrees here in Minnesota in November. So, I mean, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I think it's something like that here in Ohio, too. So
Yeah.
it's like 45 or 50. I actually had the door to my balcony open for a big chunk of the day today because the thermostat in this apartment is the worst thermostat I've ever seen in my entire life. I've had broken thermostats that do better. I said, like, is my thermostat broken? And they said, no, they're all like that. They basically just bought the crappiest thermostats known to man, and they've got boxes of them. And so it's if you want it to kick in, if you want the air conditioner to kick in at 70 degrees, you have to set it for 75.
Okay.
And on the heating side of things, I've yet to figure out exactly what the configuration is to get the heating part to work right. I don't know what the magic setting is to get it to, I want it to just be like 70 degrees all the time.
Right.
Can't figure out what the right thermostat setting is. It seems like just when I think I've got it figured out, it won't work. It doesn't work. And, it is what it is. Yeah, that's a good point. I've only been here 18 months, right? You'd think I'd have it figured out by now, but.
This adds to your list of reasons to not be there anymore, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Pat knows, but the rest of you may not know. So the apartment is considered temporary quarters. I decided I did not want to move 400 miles, start a new job, and buy a house all at the same time. So I decided I'll do the first two, move into an apartment for a year or two, and then get a lay of the land, et cetera, and decide where I want to live, and then go buy a house. And I purposefully got an apartment that was too small for me, as you can witness by, that. I got a place that was too small for me because I wanted to wake up every morning and go, damn it, I'm still here. I got to fix that. And then I got to spend a year in a lockdown.
Yeah, it'd be really nice to have your own house at this point.
Oh, yeah. But, on the flip side, it's probably cheaper than having my own house right now. So I'll do the move when I can.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that a mover will have to move is in the apartment. And then I've got a storage unit with 149 boxes of books and about 50 crates of games and all the stuff. But everything that's in that storage unit is a one-person lift and fits in the back of my car. So I'm going to move into a new house, get everything set up, and then twice a week for the next 6 months, I'm going to go to the storage unit, fill up the back of my car, and move boxes.
There you go. Moving's always a lot of fun.
It's a plan. So did you do any flying this
hobby for the last decade?
The tactical kitty, yes. Who was asleep until about 20 minutes ago, because he does that. So did you do any flying this week?
Nope. No, I've had the whole week. Well, I have had the week off from my airline job.
But the Navy's keeping you busy, I'm sure.
Just a little bit. Yep.
Yeah. I took one day.
It's good to have work.
It is good to have work. I took Monday off. I did not take Friday off or Wednesday off because I wasn't planning on taking Wednesday off anyway. Let me put it that way. Because my thought was that I'll take Monday off and then it'll be nice and quiet on Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday, I did have a doctor's appointment and I went and got the shingles shot, which kicked my ass. You're in trouble when the doctor says, if you have fever and chills for like 48 hours afterwards, don't worry about it. That's normal. So I was basically didn't sleep worth crap that night, was kind of down at parade rest all day on Thanksgiving. I wasn't going anywhere. So I instead of sitting at my computer working, I laid on my couch and watched TV. And my shoulder is still sore. It's probably now at the point where I can sleep on it, but it'll be the first night that I'll be able to sleep on it. And I can still sort of feel the knot where the injection was. I was talking to a friend of mine though, who had to get the Yeah, I had to get a yellow fever vaccine because he was going to Africa. It gave him yellow fever.
Well, it is kind of what they injected him with, right?
He missed 6 weeks of work.
Holy shit.
Now, the good news in that is if you have like full up, like regular, no shit, A-list level yellow fever, you miss 6 months of work.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's still kind of a high price for the vaccine.
It's a high price, but James took away from it the correct lesson. He said, some people would take away the lesson of this, which is like, I shouldn't have gotten that vaccine. And the lesson he took away with was, no, it's really a good thing I did get the vaccine, because if I really actually got yellow fever, it'd probably kill me.
Yeah. Yeah. 6 months in bed. Yeah.
And they gave it to him 6 months before the trip, so he was able to make the trip. So
was he down bad enough that he doesn't work, or you just feel like crap for 6 weeks?
No, he couldn't work for 6 weeks. He said it was the coldest he's ever been. He had fever and chills at the same time. He said it was the worst that he's ever. I mean, he was like out solid, like did not do any work for 6 weeks.
Wow.
I think.
Well, I hope he was going there for something really important.
Yeah, you want to hear the funny part of it?
Probably not really important.
Anybody who works for DoD has had something like this happen. I mean, it happens in the rest of the world too. He got invited to go give a lecture. Between when he got invited and when he executed that trip, the people that invited him rotated to a new billet. The new people are going like, who is this guy and why is he here? So
that sounds about right.
So he spent 3 hours there, gave the lecture, and left. Took him 8 days round trip to give a 3-hour lecture. Not quite the worst Well, actually, that probably is kind of the worst I've heard.
It's possible I might take a different lesson from that.
I did have my boss at the Center for Naval Analysis, Peter Perla, who if you've done anything with professional war gaming, he's the godfather of professional war gaming. Literally wrote the book on it that's been cited for the last 30 years. But Peter did a trip to Hawaii from DC as a day trip. 14 hours on an airplane. Got onto the island, went to Pac Fleet, briefed the admiral, took a cab back to the airport, got on an airplane, flew home. He was on island 4 hours.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I can't beat that. But yeah, we once flew to Brio just to go for lunch.
What were you doing at the time?
We were on strike at our airline. So I went to Ireland. I hung out in Key West, went to San Diego, went to Brazil.
That could be fun.
Worse things. Beats a kick in the teeth. So, all right.
So, what are we going to do tonight, Pat? He asked, pretending that he doesn't know what the answer is.
So we are going to continue. We're going to continue with the our run through of the battles, or at least some of the near battles that Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise engaged in during the 5-year mission, and we may even go into the movies in a couple more. I seem to be able to get 3 episodes a week done, and so we would have a couple more parts in this series. We don't have to do it obviously straight through, but to get all the way through the movies, I think we need 2 more episodes for this. There's 3 more from the original series. Then we'd have the movies. Wrath of Khan might take up a little bit of time, but we already hit the Kobayashi Maru pretty hard early on. So
yeah.
So yeah, so that's the series. We're going to just kind of, and then the idea is to wrap it up with a discussion about Captain Kirk and leadership and tactics and how would you beat Captain Kirk?
Okay, that sounds good. So
and a few other observations about captains of the Enterprise.
Okay, I'll remind everybody because I think we talked about this. I don't know if we ever actually explicitly came out and said it. The plan that Pat and I kind of have is that since Pat's going to go back to spending more time in the cockpit and hence more time in more time without having more time in the cockpit, less time able to control his own schedule, and being in a place where he has good internet connectivity at a time when he needs good internet connectivity, that sort of stuff. The end result of that is that there's probably some times where Pat's going to be unavailable. And so we're taking advantage of Pat's availability right now to do some of this stuff. And then when Pat's unavailable, then I'll have the con. And we'll go back, and I've got a bunch of slides. In fact, I was working on some of them today. I've got a bunch of slides talking about, I want to take a look at Andromeda Ascendant because I think it's a particularly good example of how do you create a Navy for a science fiction visual media property. And I've got some other stuff that I'll do too. And we'll just sort of operate on the theory that if Pat's around, Pat's probably got the ball, and if he's not around, I've got the ball, and we're each prepared to take over if the other one can't make it. Oh, and speaking of people who can't make it, last we heard about Alec is Alec supposedly has a router on order. That's what he said, that it's the router shows up on Monday. It was unclear to me from his message whether the router comes and they plug it into an internet and then he's got connectivity, or the router comes and sits in the middle of his coffee table waiting for workmen to come up and finish digging trenches and wiring and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I know that there's a milestone of a router showing up on Monday. I have no idea what that means in terms of what his connectivity is.
I guess at present his router is his car and ability to drive to someplace with a connection.
yeah, and like he was on earlier, earlier in the week on Friday actually. So earlier in the week, that would be another way of saying yesterday. He was on yesterday morning and did sort of a Black Friday thing while he was doing fulfillment. I don't know if you watch him at all during the week, but he'll go into the studio, which has got a little section set up to do fulfillment over in the corner because all that stuff moved out of his basement. And so he'll just turn on the camera and talk to people while he's walking around and putting stuff in boxes and stuff like that. And so it's really kind of interesting. You can watch your order being filled in real time. I put in an order for some mugs to send to my brother, and he's going like, Chris, what are you doing? I could just send you mugs. It's like, no. Go ahead. Do it. Go ahead. I'm sending these off to my brother. So, he'll get the order and you watch him sort of pack it in real time.
Cool. Not bad.
All right. So I will let you go. So go ahead and launch your slides. And in the meantime, I'm going to go sort through chat. The last couple of times I haven't done my post-game analysis, go through and respond to all the chat stuff because I've been able to do it while Pat's been talking. So I'm going to try to do that again tonight. So all yours, Pat. I'm now going to go do the other stuff.
I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see, hide this. And I believe we are set. So I think what you can see right now, I believe, should be Chris, can you see the screen? Is it working? Hello? Okay, so.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay, great.
I gave you a thumbs up, but I don't know if you saw that.
No, I can't see anything right now.
Okay.
Anyhow, so this is episode 3. Last week we talked about the arena. That's where Kirk fought the Gorn, and the Enterprise fought a Gorn ship in orbit around Cestus 3, with Sulu in command of the ship. Then there was Errand of Mercy, where the Enterprise, again, Kirk beams down to the planet, and the Enterprise gets attacked and has to leave the Organia, the planet of Organia, and then Sulu again is in command in the fight, and comes back with a fleet of ships to fight the 8 Klingon ships that showed up in orbit around Organia. Now, we don't see a lot of that battle because the Organians stopped the war, but anyway, so that's what we covered last week. And so, and then we got Doomsday Machine, which is, once again, Kirk was off the ship, and Matt Decker, Commodore Decker, took over the Enterprise. And so in those 3 episodes, we got to see the crew of the Enterprise in battle and in action without Captain Kirk around. So it kind of goes towards the the training and stuff and whatever Kirk was doing to keep his crew sharp without him, which is a good idea in dangerous situations, because at least certainly in the military, you want other people to, you always want to train your replacement, because you could be unexpectedly gone at any time, and certainly duty in Starfleet's dangerous, especially as the captain when you beam down with every boarding party and every away team. So anyways, we talked about those 3 last week. So today we're going to talk about Friday's Child, The Deadly Years, and Journey to Babel. So these are second season episodes, and they're pretty good. And we've got some shorter battles and stuff. None of them are quite like Balance of Terror. The combat or near combat that occurs is not the full episode like Balance of Terror was. But anyways, and before we get started, the first I got Friday's Child. It's out of order, going by star dates. Friday's Child should come after Errand of Mercy, but before Doomsday Machine. So it should have been mixed in there. And the second thing is during the Doomsday Machine episode, I believe I said that they destroyed the planet killer by blowing up the Constitution in the planet killer. However, I think I said warp core, and it was actually that they blew up the impulse engines. So after all, as Scotty said, the shape they were in, it was hard to keep them from blowing up anyways. So anyhow, here's a quick trivia question. How many megatons is the fusion explosion caused by overloading the impulse engine? So we'll see if anybody has some answers at the end of the show today.
Hey, Pat.
Yes.
So let me offer an idea for something. So I've got this great idea that you should do, that we should do at some point. So one of the things about the original TV show in particular is that most of you know out there, but let me go ahead and say it again. Most of the episodes are not shown in the order that they're filmed, and so and they're filming these episodes back to back, right? So by the time an episode is shown, they may have actually done a whole lot more thinking about what something looks like, etc. They've got a lot more experience. At some point, we should go through and sort of do a comparison of what the shooting order was versus the broadcast order, and how that sort of changes our understanding of the development of combat in this universe.
All right. I'm ready.
Yeah, because like some of the things that you see, you can kind of look at them and go, yeah. I mean, you'll see an earlier episode that looks more sophisticated than a later episode, and it's actually that you're watching them in reverse order.
Yeah.
Like Corbinite Maneuver, I'm trying to remember where that was. It was, I want to say Corbinite Maneuver was the first episode filmed, but it wasn't the first episode shown.
I don't believe it was the first episode filmed. I think it was. Well, you know what? I'm not going to spout off. I'm not entirely 100% certain. My guess would be where no man has gone before.
No, I mean the first non-pilot.
Okay, got it.
Okay, hold on a second. This was the first regular episode produced after the 2 pilots, and the first episode filmed in which DeForest Kelley played Dr. Leonard McCoy. Because they were not aired in production order, audiences saw them for the first time in Man Trap. So Man Trap was the 6th one filmed, but the first one shown. This was the first one filmed, and it was the 10th one shown. And so, there's lots of all the weirdnesses in there. Some of those you can just explain by the fact that they're showing them out of order. So, but we should add that to our list of things to do.
Okay, sounds good. All
right, back to you.
All right. So, first episode is Friday's Child. And just basically, so for those of you for the first time, we're basically talking about the battles or the near battles that occur, how Kirk or members of his crew command the Enterprise during the incident. We're not getting too deep into inconsistencies or anything like that, or super deep into the episodes. Now, I understand that Star Trek's not supposed to be about combat and all that kind of stuff. So we do see that Kirk, tries to avoid these things, and the fact that after 79 episodes, there's only a handful of these kind of episodes. So most of the time, they obviously avoid this sort of thing. So in Friday's Child, basically, it's after the Organian Peace Treaty, and the Federation and the Klingons are competing for an agreement with the planet Capella 4, and they beam down. Kirk leaves Scotty in command of the Enterprise, while he, Spock, McCoy, and the security guard beam down to convince them to sign a mining treaty for a rare element called topoline, and it's used for life support systems. So it's an important thing, and when they beam down, the security guard sees a Klingon. He reacts, instinctively, thinking there might be a threat, and our security guard gets immediately killed by a Capellan who throws one of their they call it a Kligot, but it's kind of like a throwing star. Anyways, and he kills of course, nails the security guard, and he dies almost instantly. So didn't even survive very far into the landing party. So as it turns out, the Klingons have arrived before the Federation did, and the Federation intel didn't know that there were Klingons on the planet already. So, but most of the action we're going to talk about here, obviously most of the episode occurs down on the planet Capella 4, but the action we're going to talk about is Scotty and him playing cat and mouse with a Klingon vessel. So above the planet, the Enterprise detects a ship at extreme range of their sensors. Scotty's in command, and he assumes that it is a Klingon ship, since presumably they're near the border. Then, in a little bit later, Uhura picks up a distress call from the SS Deirdre. It's under attack from a Klingon, and it's running from the Klingons. Scotty's unsuccessful in trying to call Captain Kirk. And of course, the Enterprise is in orbit around the planet. So Kirk has clearly lost his communicator and stuff at this point, so he can't get a hold of Kirk. The signal that they get is, we are under heavy attack by Klingon vessels. 2 convoy ships are already damaged. We must have help, Enterprise. Acknowledge. Please acknowledge. Repeat. So Sulu lays in an intercept course. And so we can probably assume that it might be it could potentially be a scout ship. The Klingon down on the planet does say that his ship is just a small scout ship. He could, of course, be lying, but that is what he says. So this is Scotty and Chekhov looking at the sensor data, and obviously we've got the blip up here for the vessel that they're potentially they've contacted on their sensors. So, like I said, Uhura picks up the signal. They're under heavy attack. 2 convoy ships are already damaged. They must have help, and they call the Enterprise by name, asking to acknowledge. So Sulu lays in the intercept course, and basically Scotty says, they ask, what about the captain? Scotty says, we have a distress call from a Federation ship. So that's where our duty lies. And they take the Enterprise out of orbit to go help out to go assist the SS Deirdre. Now, when they reach the last known position of the ship, there's no evidence of a battle. There's no evidence of debris. There's no residual particles. So Scotty orders a search pattern. But over time, Scotty reasons that a vessel can't just disappear, and the Enterprise is much faster than any freighter. A freighter can only travel at warp 2, which is 30 times slower than the Enterprise or something like that. So warp 2 at this time in this era is about 8 times the speed of light, whereas warp 6 would be somewhere around 216 times the speed of light. So Enterprise is significantly faster. So they should have found the debris. If they got anywhere close to the position of the Deirdre, they should have been able to find it. And then eventually Scotty replays the tape, and he figures out, oh, wait a minute, they called us by name. So how would a civilian freighter know that the Enterprise was in town? So Scotty continues to search a little longer just to be 100% sure, but then he decides to head back to Capella. As he's heading back to Capella, he receives another distress call from the USS Carolina, which is a freighter that's known to be in the sector. So Scotty orders that they ignore that distress call. He calls for warp 6, and then calls for warp 5 initially, then warp 6 as soon as the Enterprise will take it. And he says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Oh, I had a typo there. So, and then, of course, Chekhov, deciding to screw with them, says, yes, I know this saying. It was invented in Russia. So it's apparently a Russian proverb. I didn't know that. So they detect a Klingon ship in front of them. As they get closer to Capella, there's a Klingon ship between them and the planet. So Scotty orders Sulu to slow to sublight 1/2, and they keep trying to hail the Klingon ship. It does not answer any of the hails, so Scotty says, all right then. He calls for battle stations, ordered the weapons to be armed, and he says, close out the frequency, Lieutenant Uhura. We're going to go right down their throat if necessary. Let's see if they have the belly for it. So in Scotty's case, if you remember in my first talk, we talked about the importance of knowing what game you're playing. And I talked about poker, where you can bluff a little bit, and you don't necessarily have to have a strong hand. Chess, where you can see the entire board, you can see all the pieces on the board. In theory, you should be able to see any attacks coming, but obviously people are better at playing that game. And then I like to add that there's a third game, and that is chicken. And that's exactly what Scotty decides to play with the Klingon ship. And Scotty later reveals that the Klingon didn't quite have the stomach for fighting. And so with chicken, pretty much only the most dedicated player is going to continue the game. And it's possible that not all Klingons wake up in the morning and say, today is a good day to die. So it could have been a Klingon battlecruiser. From what we saw on screen, it looked like it might be a Klingon battlecruiser. But it also could have been, a smaller scout ship or something like that didn't really have too much of a chance against a Constitution-class heavy cruiser. So meanwhile, back on the planet, Kirk says Kirk is involved in combat on the ground with some Capellans chasing them and such. And we get to see here, this is just one little side note that we get to see about Kirk. And we see it more in like Star Trek 6. About Kirk's attitude towards Klingons and stuff like that. But there's a Klingon, and Kirk's really still a little mad that his security guard got killed. And Kirk says, there's just one thing. I want the Klingon. He says, one of us must get them. So Kirk's kind of willing to sacrifice him and Spock if at least one of them can kill the Klingon. And Spock says, "Revenge, Captain." And Kirk says, "Why not?" So he really doesn't like. It's just another one of those tidbits about Kirk that shows he really doesn't like Klingons. Okay, so the next episode. So basically, in this one, we see that Scotty's command style is pretty direct. Scotty wasn't wasting his time with any subterfuge, no deceptions, nothing overly clever. He was just going to use brute force and drive straight down the Klingon's throat and see if the Klingon would handle it. Now, from playing Starfleet battles, taking a Constitution class cruiser against a frigate, or even against a D7, a Klingon cruiser never wanted to go in a head-to-head, point-blank fight with a Federation heavy cruiser. They were just going to come out on the bad end of that every time. So the Klingon was probably at least smart in this era. If Starfleet battles or the the FASA Starship Combat game were any indicators of the relative power. So, okay, so in the next one, we have the Deadly Years. And this is the one where if it had been a Friends episode, it would have been called the one where the crew gets old. And so this is the one where they got infected with something on the planet, and all the crew started aging, everybody except for Chekhov. But the battle that occurred here, or the interesting starship combat thing that occurs here, is that they have Commodore Stalker aboard, and he is trying to get to Starbase 10. And they're near, in this particular episode, they're along the Romulan neutral zone. So seeing that Kirk and the other senior staff are aging because of this illness or disease, he believes they should get to the resources of Starbase 10 as quickly as they can. So he reluctantly, and he convinces a reluctant Spock as well, that they must call for a competency hearing for Kirk. And because as Kirk is repeating orders, he's forgetting things, and he's clearly not up for the challenge of command anymore. He goes through the aging process. Bottom line is they hold a hearing, and Commodore Stalker eventually ends up taking command of the Enterprise. And so he orders the Enterprise to cross the neutral zone. So apparently they're in a portion of space along the border where they can get to Starbase 10 faster if they cut across the Romulan neutral zone. So there's probably just a little piece or a little edge of the Romulan neutral zone that the Enterprise is going to cut across just to get to Starbase 10 a little bit quicker. So he orders them to enter the neutral zone. So later on, when Kirk is down in the sick bay, Kirk reacts to finding out that, at first Kirk thinks it's Spock that's going to take over. Then later on, he finds out that it's Stalker. And Kirk's reaction is pretty definite. He says, "Stalker, are you crazy? He's never had a field command. He's a chair-bound paper pusher." And then later, as they get into battle, he says, "There's a greenhorn up there running my ship." So so sure enough, the Romulans appear, and they start lobbing plasma torpedoes at the Enterprise. They don't acknowledge any communications attempts from the Enterprise, and Stalker basically freezes up on the bridge. He's not a combat officer. He's not a starship commander. He is not trained for this. He's not prepared for this. I had an admiral that I worked for on staff for, and he said, "In a crisis situation, you will not rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back on the best level of your training." Well, Stalker has no training for this. As Chekhov's asking for orders, and Uhura's calling out that there are damage reports, and Sulu's calling things off. Excuse me. it becomes very stressful because suddenly he's got to make a decision in real time, and he doesn't know what decision to make. And basically, he keeps saying he just wishes if he could just explain to the nice Romulans, I'm sure they would understand. And so and then he eventually concludes that he has to surrender. So he is not a person who's prepared for this. And the other question I have, and I think this is interesting. So this man, Commodore Stocker, he's a Commodore. So what has to be true in Starfleet or in the Federation for him to both get command of a starbase and also believe that the Romulans would be reasonable in this situation? What kind of bad information is floating out there, or is the promotion system set up so badly in Starfleet that someone this naive gets command of the Enterprise? Or is it that that's a common trait amongst most people who aren't out here on the frontier with the Enterprise? So anyways, probably food for a larger discussion. If we take Commodore Stocker's reaction or his course of action and his beliefs seriously in this episode, what has to be true within the Federation and attitudes in the Starfleet? I think that's kind of an interesting notion. So of course, as shields are failing, time is running out. The Enterprise is surrounded by roughly 10 Romulan birds of prey. So tactically, they've pretty much got the Enterprise dead to rights. We can assume that with 10-to-1 odds, the Romulans figured that they could just safely lob long-range plasma torpedoes at the Enterprise and whittle it down over time. Because with 10 ships, even in a three-dimensional environment, you can surround somebody. And there aren't too many avenues where they can go to escape. And presumably the plasma torpedoes, if other games like the FASA and old Starfleet Battles games are any indication, they do a lot of damage, but they take a long time to power up. And so with 10 ships, they could keep a constant stream of torpedoes just whittling down the Enterprise. They know time's on their side. They certainly could have just, all closed in at the same time and had one big conflagration of a battle, and they probably could have killed the Enterprise very quickly. Then we wouldn't have a show. And so I can only assume the Romulans decided to take the safe course of action and take their time whittling down the Enterprise. But they would also, of course, risk one of those ships would probably be at risk of taking the full brunt of the Enterprise's weapons before they did take down the Enterprise, even with their greater numbers. So they were patient, and I think it's reasonable that Romulans are patient. They knew time was on their side, firepower was on their side, so they had a good reason to do that. So down in sickbay, Kirk is pissed that this desk-bound paper pusher's in command of his ship, but Spock comes into the sickbay with an unrefined serum, and it's allegedly going to be a cure for this disease. But it might kill you or it might cure you, and he doesn't really know. They don't know the dosage or anything like that. And they were going to test it on someone first, but Kirk, of course, volunteers to take the first test because the Enterprise is being attacked. And, there's really not too much of a choice here. But to a certain degree, it's another Kobayashi Maru test for Kirk, or an actual real-life Kobayashi Maru test, because he kind of faces the same choice that Spock did in The Wrath of Khan. He's down there in sickbay. If he just stays there, he knows he's going to die, and so will everyone else on the Enterprise. But if he takes the serum, he might die, but there's a chance to take command of the Enterprise back, and maybe the ship will have some hope. Because Kirk's down there, he's strapped to a sickbay bed, but he still hasn't given up. So, and of course, the serum works okay, and he runs up to the bridge. He gets cured, and this is another one where Kirk knows he can't win with brute force. It's 10-to-1 odds. So he chooses a bluff. And of course, he uses the Corbomite maneuver bluff again on the Romulans. he sends it out on the code that Starfleet intelligence had said the Romulans had broken. Says, hey, I'm about to light off the Corbomite maneuver device, so everybody stay out of this area for several years. We're gonna take out this area and everybody around us. That causes the Romulans to back off a little bit and gives the Enterprise some breathing room to escape. So once again, we have Kirk bluff and get out of the situation without truly having to fight. And then the last episode we're going to look at tonight is Journey to Babel. In this episode, Enterprise is transporting a group of diplomats to an important conference. So it, of course, comes with all the intrigue and drama that you would expect from diplomats. There's lots of squabbling diplomats. The Tellarite named Gav, who had an argument with Sarek, is killed. Kirk gets stabbed later on. There's lots of drama and intrigue that ensues, but that's not important right now. There's some space combat we can talk about in this episode. So as they are transporting these people to the conference on Corridon, at Babel, regarding the planet Corridon, they detect unauthorized signals being transmitted from the Enterprise while there's a ship shadowing the Enterprise at the same time. So in this particular case, in the last half of the episode, Chekhov reports that that the alien ship later on in the episode is turning towards the Enterprise. Now, Kirk has come up to the bridge after being stabbed to get Spock to go to convince Spock that he's actually okay, and McCoy has given him the okay to resume duties. So Spock goes down and acts as a blood donor for his father's surgery. So Kirk was going to be up there just long enough to call Scotty to the bridge, and he was going to head down to his quarters. But right before Kirk is about to leave the bridge, Chekhov reports that the alien ship is changing course and turning towards the Enterprise. So Kirk calls for the deflectors to come on, red alert, and the phasers get armed, and the ship is ready for battle. This mysterious alien ship makes a pass at the Enterprise and scores a hit on the Enterprise. And then Chekhov goes and takes the sensor station, and the ship, which turns out to be an Orion ship, it turns and makes a second run on the Enterprise. This time Kirk fires, but the phasers are a clean miss. If you look over here, that little dot right there, that's where the spaceship is, and you can see the phasers can't even follow it fast enough. It's making a run at warp 8. So this is definitely combat at high warp. But as the ship makes the first attack on the Enterprise, the sensor reports, Chekhov can report from the sensors that it's only armed with phasers. So no photon torpedoes, no super weapons. It just happens to be fast and maneuverable and really hard to hit. A little bit of a stealth coating as well. And earlier in the episode, it did not allow the stealth, whatever we want to label it, the stealth coating did not allow them to scan inside to get life signs, so they knew who was on board the ship. So the alien ship makes another pass, then a third and a fourth, and more. Meanwhile, so as these passes go by, McCoy is down in sickbay trying to do surgery. Kirk orders a full spread of photon torpedoes, and then as it makes its next pass, the torpedoes completely miss as well, and the Enterprise starts taking some damage. Chekhov reports that the number 4 shield is buckled. Kirk orders auxiliary power to the shield. That helps to reinforce it. Despite it being weak, but it is a little bit more reinforced at this point. Now, meanwhile, the thing makes repeated runs on the Enterprise, and her reports that damage reports are coming from every deck on the Enterprise. So clearly the shields have been penetrated. Chekhov reports the number 2 shield is gone. We don't truly know what side of the ship or what part of the ship the number 2 and the number 4 shield protects. In Starfleet battles, the number 4 shield was the aft shield, and the number 2 shield would be forward starboard side of the ship. So, but of course, in reality, in air quotes reality, it would have to have shielding that also protects it on the top and the bottom side of the ship as well. So, either way, number 2 shield is gone. So Enterprise is definitely taking damage through the shields, and other shields are getting weakened as this thing makes its repeated passes without Enterprise being able to score a hit. So now that the Enterprise is damaged, Kirk orders engineering to cut power on the port side, then wait for his signal and to cut power on the starboard side. And then a moment later, Kirk cuts power to the starboard side of the ship, and then he allows the Enterprise to just drift like he is dead in space. He is damaged, and of course, the alien ship sensors could tell that the Enterprise is damaged. There is definitely damage coming in from all decks and everything like that. So the Enterprise, so Kirk just decides to turn off the power and make it seem even worse than it actually is. So the Orion ship, now seeing that they've pretty much believing that they've killed the Enterprise, it slows to sublight to approach the Enterprise and the apparently crippled Enterprise. And perhaps it needs to beam some people over, perhaps it wants to kidnap some people, or just make sure that the Enterprise is dead and they just want to finish it off with a close range attack. It could be that they could only do pinpricks making high-speed runs at the Enterprise, but at low speed and at point-blank range against a crippled ship, they figure they could probably finish it off in one more good attack, and they could have the Enterprise finished off. So, but once the ship gets to 75,000 kilometers, Kirk fires at the slow-moving ship and is able to score a hit. It no longer has the advantage of high speed to protect it. So, and they win the battle. They score a hit, and we can see over here parts of the ship as it is crippled and is now just drifting and tumbling. And Chekhov pumps his fist and says, "We got him." However, Kirk's getting ready to, of course, beam aboard survivors when the Orion ship decides to self-destruct. So and that pretty much ends the battle right there. But again, in this episode, we see Kirk use deception to handle a situation that his ship is not a form of combat that his ship is not fully prepared to deal with, and in this case, the deception works. So, and that pretty much wraps up what we have for today as far as these go. Next week, we will talk about the Ultimate Computer, Elan of Troyes, and the Enterprise incident, which the Enterprise incident is a fairly quick battle, but it's mostly the Enterprise running under cloak. So that'll be a quick one. And potentially after that, what we are looking at doing is talking about Star Trek II, the brief little bits of combat we may have seen in Star Trek III, Star Trek V. Enterprise is really just trying to stay out of the Klingons' way there. But then we have a pretty good battle at the end of 6. And then we'll talk about some conclusions about Captain Kirk, his combat style, and that kind of lends itself towards a discussion on leadership and stuff like that too. So we'll finish these off over the next few weeks. All right.
Okay, Pat. So there's been an interesting discussion taking place in chat.
Oh, good. All right.
And there was a comment made that when I said, "Hey, what's the source on that?" the person said, "Pat." So
Chris, you know
okay.
you still have a Lego in front of your camera, right?
What do you mean still? Yeah. Yeah. It's my new avatar. I can move it out of the way. That's a trick that I saw on Facebook. Unfortunately, the built-in camera doesn't quite have the right field of depth for that to make that work just right. So it's a little bit blurry. So in any event, the comment made was that photon torpedo detonates. It only emits photons. It only emits photons in the upper 90%, no gamma, no X-ray, no radio. Photons only in a highly efficient ratio.
Sure.
Did you say that?
I don't remember saying that, but of course, there is tape. I'm sure if I did say it by mistake, then I apologize. But I don't recall that. I believe there are, I think what we talked about is that there are antimatter explosions, and they smash a certain amount of matter and antimatter together to create the explosion that they get. So I don't think so. That's been my understanding of the warhead of the photon torpedo.
Yeah, and it would have caused my ears to perk up if you had said that, because that I don't remember ever seeing that anyplace else. But there's a few places I can go look, but that would be really weird. I mean, the speculation was that you can end up with some, whatever causes it to be able to do that would give you some really weird effects. Now, to some degree, like X-rays are photons, right? I mean, that's how they're transmitted. It's it's just a very, very high energy photon. So, but it's worth, I'll have to pull the thread on that to get a better idea of that. So
someone here says gamma radiation is photons. I am not the physics guy.
Yeah, gamma radiation.
So without doing some research, I'm not going to wax poetic.
Yeah, gamma is photons also. Beta is particles. Yeah. If you believe that there's a difference between, if you A, believe there's a difference between particles and photons, and B, believe that either one of them actually exists and they aren't just like, little bits of string or information or magic or something like that. So he points out alpha is too. Somebody else pointed that out. Philip Banks pointed that out. There was a comment I was going to make at one point. I decided not to. I think it was during the Deadly years, where it's really impressive exactly how fast that serum worked.
Yeah, it's pretty darn lucky.
Yeah, the only thing more impressive than how quickly they aged was how quickly they unaged.
Yes. Well, it had to happen fast, right?
Yeah. So, buddy, really? Is now the time?
So I see a question here from Stephen Ross. Are you going to talk about the episode with the space Romans? I'm not aware that there's any space battles in there. So certainly not necessarily part of this this particular group of talks. I had not planned to do that. I suppose in theory at some point we could go through each one episode by episode, but there's lots of other people who have done that on podcasts and stuff like that. For anybody who's interested, I'm certain you can find a few of those things.
Yeah. Speaking of space Romans, there actually is an interesting series of books by R.M. Mellick, the Tour of the Merrimack series, where the two protagonists, the two powers that are fighting the war against each other, are the Roman Empire and the United States of America. And the idea behind this was that the Roman Empire only kind of fell. There was always this master plan to bring it back. And the master plan got hidden in other plans, like the Illuminati and the Freemasons, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I mean, this was the explanation as to why Latin was the language of scholars and why law is done in Latin and why it's done in medical is done in Latin. It was just basically to keep the Latin language alive so they could eventually adopt it. And the Romans were responsible for the formation of the United States. And then when the United States started having interstellar colonies, they just sort of sent the word out and said, everybody move to this planet, we'll take it over.
Mm-hmm.
So they did. And it's a fascinating series for a couple of reasons. Like from a technological standpoint, the starships were designed by Airbus,
Uh-huh.
and by that I mean the computer can override the orders.
Yeah, and the Airbus pilot only has 49% of the vote. Skynet has the rest.
which on the one hand, I've always sort of, the more I think about that, the more I like that idea. I mean, I think there's a limit to everything, but as the 737 MAX proved, Boeing does it too. It's just they lied to you about it.
Yeah, that one didn't turn out so well.
Yeah, I mean, Boeing used to be a great company.
Yeah.
But Boeing, as near as I can tell, what happened was McDonnell Douglas got ruined by a particular set of bad managers who decided that bean counting was more important than good engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and so that company goes under, and they get bought by Boeing that says, "Hey, we've got this excellent management team from McDonnell Douglas that can save us all a whole bunch of money by bean counting. Let's promote those guys."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's going to be pretty impressive. In the end, it's looking like there's the same management team's going to do serious damage to two different companies.
Wow, that's a twofer, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. I don't believe you can make all your decisions by purely quantifiable things. I mean, obviously, it depends on what you're after, what you're in, but there are other things that matter. Though engineering should be measurable. But
yeah, and in this case, it was
purely money. That's not the right choice.
It was a classic case of accountants telling engineers that the plane was safe enough.
Yeah, exactly.
But in any event, that Attack of the Merrimack series or Tour of the Merrimack series is pretty interesting. It's also interesting because like one of the things they have was something they call the shotgun, which is basically a human created wormhole that takes them to the other side of the galaxy. There's a very interesting twist that happens about 2/3 of the way through the first novel that it's really hard to describe it without giving spoilers, so I won't describe it. But it was an utterly brilliant way of showing the reader something that the characters don't see throughout the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really clever, and I need to go back and reread them because it's been a while since I've read them. I enjoyed them a lot, but there's actually something really funny. They end up fighting these other aliens, and the Marines, the U.S. Marines, are good at dealing with these aliens, and for reasons that I won't get into, you have to fight them with swords.
Gotcha.
And the Romans are actually really kind of nonplussed because their dress uniform looks like a Roman imperial legionnaire, right? Complete with the Lemmelor armor and the gladius and all the other stuff. So their dress uniform actually includes a gladius, but they really don't have any idea how to use it.
Uh-huh.
And when they end up working with the Marines kind of like make fun of them for that. So,
gotcha. So let's see here. I know we're getting at the end of our time, so Lissa's probably going to want to get going too. But yeah. I did notice a couple people commented on Commodore Stalker. So yeah, I was interested in thinking, yeah, he's probably a logistics officer, maybe not. Clearly does not appear to be a line officer, so it's probably just not commanding a starship in battles, just not his bailiwick. I like Stalker has an uncle in HR.
Yeah, that can help out. So I forget, have I asked on this show about the 7 uniform services? Now 8 at their Space Force.
Yeah, I don't know when that becomes official. Do we have a date on them?
Let's say it's still 7 for now. So I'll give everybody the first 5, right? So it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. But what are the other 2, right? So like if you're a lieutenant, you encounter one of these guys and they're in uniform, you have to know whether you need to salute them or not. So does anybody put in a chat what the right answer is, and I'll keep looking until I see it. Yeah, in Space Force. Well, I'm not sure whether, I can't remember whether the uniform service of Space Force actually exists yet or not. I should know that because I work for similar people. But so ignoring Space Force. Nope, not Cyber Command. That's a command. It's not a separate force. So, anybody? Okay, so Tim, I don't know how to say your last name. Tim gets it right. I hope Tim didn't look it up. One of them is the Public Health Service. So there was some discussion about C. Everett Koop taking command and line versus non-line officers. C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General, he gets a salute. Surgeon General gets a salute. So the Uniform Public Health Service. And the other one is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. They have a very small uniform service. It's like 100 people in it. Something like that. It's small. Or maybe it was 100 officers. It's very small, and they run ships. And they're considered a uniform services. So,
well, thank you, Jim, for the comment there. And thanks, everybody. It's been a good night. I think it's probably time to wrap it up for the evening.
Yes, I think it is. So, well, everybody, thank you very much for joining us.
We'll see you all next week.
Yeah, let's do this again next week.
Yeah, tell your friends.
All right. See you
and
later.
If you haven't done it yet, like and subscribe to the pages and stuff like that. That'll help keep the thing going. All right, everybody, have a good night.